Alright, we are working on Chapter 4 review, and one of the first things, and I know we've talked about this in the past, is with the word, it just simply says factor, and then a factor of these numbers and variables, and this again is 50p squared q. Okay, so I'm going to let you, again, to get the most out of this today, you're going to want to hit pause at every problem, solve it, and then you can compare your answers to the answer that I get, and hopefully my explanations will help clarify things as well if you didn't understand something. So go ahead and hit pause and factor this problem. Alright, now what they want you to do is not just factor, and I know it's kind of vague, but we talked about this in class as well, is they want you to give me the prime factors of it. So you can start out with 5 times 10, 5 is prime, and then 5 times 2, and those are both prime. So then you can write them out, 2 times 5 squared, or 5 times 5 if you like, times how many p's are there? Well, there's 1, 2, so 2, oops, this needs to be up higher. So p times q. So that is your answer to this in factoring. And I know some of you, for your factors, you listed all the factors of 50 and then wrote this out with p, meaning that there's 2 p's and so forth. They want you to write this, it should be more or less prime factors of this, but they don't. They just want you to factor it out, but giving them the prime factors of it. Okay, and I will make special note of that on the test as well. Greatest common factor. Go ahead and figure this one out. So for the GCF, the greatest common factor, again, the best way is to list your factors, or you can simply do the prime factorization of each. I like to use prime factorization, which is 2 times 4, and then 2 times 2. And then for 20, you have 2 times 10. 2 is prime, and then 2 times 5, both prime. And then for my number 36, 4 times 9, and then 2 times 2, both are prime, and then 3 times 3, and they are both prime. Now you can compare, and I like to list them out, is the best way, I think. 2 times 2 times 2, putting them in order from least to greatest. 2 times 2 times 5, and then 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And once you have that, we can now compare, and you can see that we have a group of 2's, another group of 2's, and there's nothing else. Even if there was another 2 here, it's got to be in all 3 of them. So now you take this group of 2's and that group of 2, and you multiply them together, and your greatest common factor is 4. It's the largest number that will divide into each one of those numbers equally. Okay, so greatest common factor is 4. Now write 4 and 2/3 as a decimal, and if you have to do any rounding, I'm going to ask you to round to the nearest hundredths, so go ahead and do that. Alright, so the 4, you can just simply, that's going to be in front of the decimal point. It's going to be 4 point something. So then you take your 2/3 and you're going to divide and add my decimal point, add a 0, bring it up. How many 2's go into, or excuse me, 3's go into 20? Well, sorry. It is 6, which gives me 18. Subtract and I get 2. Then I add a 0, bring it down. How many 3's in 20 again? 6. which gives me 18. Subtract 2, add a 0, bring it down. It goes into it 6 times. And you can see what happens is that it is a repeating decimal. Okay? And they are going to want you to write it as bar notation in some cases as well. So I told you to go ahead and round it. So if you did round it, then it would be 4 67/100ths. Okay, because I told you to round to the nearest hundredths. Now, if it does not tell you to round, then you need to write it with bar notation, which would be 4 6 repeating would be your answer. Okay, 4 6/10 repeating, knowing that the 6 is the only one that repeats. Okay, so either way you did it, and I know that I told you to round to the nearest hundredths. If it does not state that, please make sure you use the bar notation. Now it says to write 3 7/10 as a percent, so go ahead and do that. Well, again, since it is 3 7/10, and since we are adding a percent sign, okay, you are trying to make this into a number that relates to 100, and since you're adding that percent sign, we talked about anytime you're adding it on, you're going to multiply it by 100, which mental math tells us that we move our decimal point 2 times to the right. So it's going to be 370%. Make sure you put that percent sign on it. Let's look at our next one. It says write as a percent, and these are some different ways that you would need to write it. So go ahead and do A and B. Alright, since this says 36 2/10 per 100, so basically it's 36.2 over 100. And remember, any number out of 100 is a percent. So 36 2/10%. That's it. Okay? That's where it's going to make you really think. Okay? Since it's per 100, it's already out of 100. Therefore, it is, that numerator is a percent, even if it has a decimal point in it. Okay? This is the ratio. This one, since we are trying to write it as a percent, again, we're adding a percent to it, so you're multiplying by 100, moving the decimal 2 times to the right. Therefore, it is equivalent to 17%. Okay? Another way of looking at this too is that this is 17/100ths, correct? Any number over 100 equals that percent for the numerator. Okay? That's just another approach to look at it. Now we're finding the LCM, the least common multiple. Go ahead and hit pause and solve for this. Now again, you can list all of these out if you choose so, or you can again start with our largest multiple, and which is 45. And you ask yourself, does 18 or 30, both of them actually, go into 45? Well, 30 definitely does not, so that's not going to work. So let's try the next multiple of 45, which 45 times 2 is going to give me 90. So the question is, does 30 go into 90? And I think most of you can recognize that it does 3 times. So the question now is, does 18 go into 90? Okay, so I'm going to use a number that's probably a number that's going to have to end in a 0. So 8 times, I'm going to say 5, because that's going to give me 40. And then carry the 4, and then 5 times 1 plus 4 more is indeed 90. So my answer for my least common multiple is 90. Remember, we're not talking about factors, we are talking about multiples. Those are numbers counting by each of these numbers, and it's the smallest one that will match up. And again, it has to be that largest number a multiple of that. So you might as well start there. It can't be less than 45. So let's look at our next one. This is finding the least common denominator. And I'm only doing one of these types of problems because you're going to use that for comparing and ordering fractions. So if you can find the least common denominator, then you're certainly going to be able to find to compare all the rest of what you need to do. So go ahead, hit pause, and find the LCD for these two fractions. So again, we're starting with 17. Does 13 go into 17 equally? Well, not equally. So let's try the next multiple of 17, which is going to be 34. Does 13 go into 34? Well, a lot of you don't know that. So let's try 3 of them. It goes 9 and 39. Well, that's a little bit more, but it's not certainly going to go into both of them. So next multiple of this number, we can add 17 to it, carry the 1, and get 51. Okay. Now, does 13 go into that? Well, we can try 13. If that's going to be a 1, we can try maybe 5 and get a start from here. That would be 5 or 15, and that's 65. That's not going to work, so let's try 13 times 4, and 12 and 52. So that isn't going to work. So we can add another 17 to this and get 68. And this was times 5, and we know that that isn't going to go into it equally. So we can do the next one of this, add another 17. This is 5, carry the 1, 85. So we can try 85 for this. And add 13 to this, and we get 8 and 78. That doesn't work. So let's try another 17 onto this, and we get 12, and 8 plus 1 or 2 more is 102. So we can try 13. It's kind of making a mess of it, I realize that. 13, this was times 6, so we'll try times 7. And 21, that's 91. That does not work. Let's try 13 times 8. That's 24 and 104. So that doesn't work. So let's try another 17. And 9, 1, and 1. And then try 13 onto this, which gives me 7, 1, and 1. So 117. Still does not. So we'll try another 17. And we get 16, 3, and 1. And we'll try a 3 onto this, which gives me 0, 1, 3, 0. Whoops. My bad. And a 1. So that does not. So you can kind of see where we're going with all of this, trying to find that least common denominator. And again, adding another 17 to it, and we get 5 and 1 and 153. Try a 3 onto this, and we get 3, 4, 1. I thought we had it, but we didn't. And so we'll try back up here again. 153 with a 17 to give me 170. And then a 143 and 13 more gives me 6, 5, 1. And then try another 13 onto this to give me 9, 6, and 1. And that does not. So if I'm getting to the point to where I'm so far along, let's try and see 13 times 17. And to where this is going to be 21. And a 5, 0, 7, 1. And so, whoops, I got some extra stuff here. So we get 1. This is going to become 12 and 2. So 221. So you can see where we left off with 170, 169. This is going to be to the point to where when you do multiply these two numbers together, you are not going to get anything different, so you have to list all those multiples out. It is 17 times 13. So once you get to a certain point, if it just does not want to end, and there was one problem on the quiz like this, the few of you went on and on and on and on, and you tried listing them all out. If you get to a certain point, and we kind of see where we got to a certain point, we're like, you know what, let's find out. 221 is the two of these numbers multiplied together. So if we get closer and closer to 221, that is more likely, since we're this close to it, 170, 169, that is going to be my least common denominator. And in this case, it is. So 221 is what you would do to solve this. And if you're trying to, and again, that's just finding the least common denominator. If you are trying to go through this, give myself some space here. Going through this, you would then take my 18, or my 8/13ths, and my 5/17ths, make them equal to 221, and you'd multiply by 13. So 5 times 13. I know we've done that over here. And so, whoops, 15 and 6, so we get 65. And then this one's going to be times 17. So 8 times 17, which gives me 56, and 13, so 136. Okay, is going to be the comparison for these two. Okay, so once again, if you have any questions, certainly ask, make note of those so we can talk about them in class tomorrow to prepare you for the test later this week. So have a great evening, and good luck on your test, and we will see you tomorrow.